Hey everybody, name's Erik. We're going to talk about relaxation today. This is the second part in this series, and I think it's going to be a good series and something really useful to a lot of people. I want to actually dedicate this to friends. There's more than one friend, including myself, that has been stressed lately. And I really felt like, why not just bring some of the tools that I'm studying? And it's kind of like a book study together. I'm going to start with this. This is an old book, 1944. Dale Carnegie, you might know him from How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. I really love this book. It's actually on YouTube, all read. I think it's like, I don't know, many hours. But if you can find, well, it's still available. You can purchase it. It does have some language that's really archaic, but it's really interesting. Really interesting. You can read this and go, we suffer the same way today. Okay. And it's about 80 years ago. I'd like to share this. It says heart disease is the number one killer in America today in 1944. During the Second World War, almost a third of a million were killed in combat. But during the same period, heart disease killed 2 million civilians. And 1 million of those casualties were caused by the kind of heart disease that is brought on by worry and high tension living. Wow. In this book, You Must Relax by Edmund Jacobson. I'll put links in the description. He talks about in the Korean War, it says there was a time when our boys were dying during the war in Korea. 300 of them died in combat, whose hearts were carefully examined subsequently. Autopsies were performed by Major William F. Enos and his associates. Even though their age averaged in the early 20s, 77% had some degree of disease of the coronary arteries. In many instances, the hearts were so severely diseased that the examiners were amazed. They could not understand how these hearts had held out during battle until the boy was killed by shot or shell and other external violence. I do not know of any reasonable way to interpret the findings of Major Enos of these poor boys of ours, but that the strain and tension of the war had proved too much for their arteries. Was it in their diet? Did their hearts degenerate because they ate too much fat, too much cholesterol? No record was found and published that could support the view that they had partaken of too much cholesterol. You got to understand, these men were fit. They were young, 20s, and eating the diet that the Army was providing at the time, probably back in 1944 or earlier, healthier than what we eat today. I don't know if trans fats and hydrogenated fats, all that had been invented. Says the Army diet does not provide any excess of fat. Nobody claims that it does. The fat content of meals provided for our Army forces was, we can assume, approximately of the same percentage was provided for those boys in typical American homes in peacetime. So far as fat content was concerned, these boys had been eating as all Americans eat on the average. Today, that would be a different story. Yet the incidence of severe coronary heart disease in these young boys was very much in excess of the incidence in American boys of the same age who had not participated in the strains and tensions of active warfare. It is said that approximately 1 out of 2 American males show the beginning hardening of the coronary arteries at the age of 35 or of 40. But what is found in these early middle-aged men is only the beginnings of the disease, not advanced disease as much as Major Enos found in many of her 300 boys. And he found marked coronary heart disease not merely in 1 out of 2, but in the majority, namely in about 77%. So here's the thing to consider. These were just 300 men that they had studied. What about all the other men that were under the strain and maybe didn't die from gunshot? Not likely they had the technology to do, imaging to see how much clogged arteries. This is suggesting that stress and strain alone, not alone, but well, is a major factor. And if we think about it, how many of those around us that had a heart attack, there's still this remnant of, well, he was under a lot of strain and stress. He was under a lot of tension. I'm seeing a lot of that happen right now because of the pandemic, because of a number of factors in American life. Not enough sleep, too much use of YouTube, and well, sorry about saying YouTube. Now they'll probably take me off the line, but too much use of internet. People are just stressed. And if we saw that as a factor that could contribute to heart disease, a whole bunch of other problems, then we might go, wow, I've got to relax. You must relax, or I must relax here. This is a study I've known for years, is that they studied doctors before their major exams and studied cholesterol levels. The cholesterol before taking their medical exams, to become a doctor, were really skyrocketing. And after the exam, they came down. So here's another indication that cholesterol could go up and down based on stress. Okay. There's a few other things I would like to. This is such a good book. When it talks about modern living, I'm just gonna. It's hard to not read just a few. It says how tense we are as people and rapidly becoming common knowledge. For years, we have been reaping a harvest of ulcers and heart attacks, of nervous and of psychiatric disorders, which this experience is gradually teaching us has something to do with their states of tension. Even, by the way, today we would think it's lack of medications. No, we need to connect the idea that we are tensing and stressing ourselves out, and it's causing mental disorders. Even popular opinion often recognizes that over effort with too much can lead to high blood pressure. However, we Americans have no monopoly on tension states. There was a time, perhaps, when life among Europeans was as quiet as the former chamber music and the pastorals of their great composers might suggest. But that day is long since past. It is now well known that tension states and disorders mentioned above are by no means limited chiefly to the New World, meaning America, but are prevalent also in Europe, from which most Americans derive. The Yugoslavia of the communists is of no exception. Thus, let's see, it's talking about problems with war, talking about tensions between states. This is interesting. Let's see, time-wise. Yeah, we have time. Thus, America today has been stimulated by participation in 2 wars in which our very way of life was threatened, and one in Korea, which awoke us from our dream of disarmament. Gone is the quietude of the 90s, which we lived in isolation from. The quarrels of Europe, protected by vast oceans. No longer are we isolated. Our attempts to maintain and to spread freedom and a democratic way of life to other lands has survived the wars, and there's still no going on, but have aroused strong reactions. For the first time in history, we Americans have become the hated targets of foreign governments, Russia, China, and their satellites, formerly our friends. Their emissaries issue venomous blasts against us in the very New York where we hope to gather them in a peaceful world organization. Over the radio and by television, we can hear and see them as warmongers, and we read of their threats against their allies of Europe. Our newspapers recount the total preparation for World War III, which we must meet or perish. Gone is the quietude of the 90s. The 90s, which 90s? 1890s. Yeah. And doesn't that sound similar today? But today it's just even so much more. This is 1944 or possibly 1966, depending on how it was revised. But now we have all this internet giving us information, maybe even hourly, on our phones, and it's causing so much more. If we're aware of these things, it's just causing much more tension. Inevitably, under these conditions, our peaceful hearts are not at rest. As a nation, we build bigger and greater armaments to include guided missiles and other fantastic weapons of atomic warfare designed for massive retaliation, etc. It talks about Pearl Harbor, and it also suggests that if we use the weapons, it would stop a whole bunch of this, but then it would be catastrophic. He uses the word, it says, however, our activities in preparation for a dreaded World War III are not negligible, and they constitute an ever-present source of national tension. Interesting idea, national tension. I think that's actually what we're suffering. And I guess I can be a person who's worked a long time in the healthcare field, probably 30 years or more, 35 years, that I can see a difference. Things are different than they were. And so it sounds like the good old days. I'm not saying that, but things are different. And I think most people are picking up on that. And this is a good leeway into our next video. But it talks about even our over tense national life of war preparation and unprecedented industry. Each individual tends to participate whether he knows it or not. We can assume that the hostess at a dinner party, even when one knows little and cares about foreign affairs and the national economy, is stimulated by the times and acts accordingly, for her actions are in part reactions to the conduct of others whom she meets, and many of those others will move and act with the masses. Well, the hostess now could be more men or women, and most likely they have it on their phones. They just immediately know what's going on. They don't have to. But this idea we can pick it up from each other. The struggle for existence is fundamental to all explanations of animal life in groups or individuals. When they say this, biologists no doubt are right, but there is more to it than their words imply. People struggle not only for existence, but also to get ahead. Often it is to get ahead of each other. Yeah, and that's kind of selfishness. And one could say that this overemphasis on self needs this and self needs that breeds more tension. And I find in my own life, if I let go and let the other person go first, just be kind, it actually has kind of a dissolving tension effect. So we will see you next time. You take care and have a great day.